matter what you've been through, you can always start over. Yeah. Prison is not the end of our story. It doesn't have to be. And going back doesn't have to be your story either. There are ways to get out and have a life worth living.
Welcome to our final episode of Season 5 of the 98% Life After Prison, a podcast dedicated to all the incarcerated people of North Carolina who will eventually be released back into our communities. I'm Judy Van Wyk, and this is part 3 of our series, Arise for Women. The voice you heard at the top of the show is that of Georgie Brown, a resident of Arise Collective in Raleigh. Arise is one of the few organizations in North Carolina that provides transitional housing for women. The collective also provides a wide array of programming and support to help formerly incarcerated women rebuild their lives as healthy, productive citizens in their communities. That includes a special opportunity to pursue a college degree from Campbell University. Did you know that between 70 and 85% of incarcerated women in North Carolina suffer from substance abuse disorder? Georgie Brown, who served 5 years and 10 months for trafficking heroin and meth, was one of them. Like so many people who struggle with addiction, Georgie experienced her share of childhood trauma, beginning with an absent father who returned from Vietnam with PTSD and became an alcoholic. This is Georgie Brown's story. If you had 2 or 3 sentences that would describe you, what would you say?
I am a very caring person who I have strengths and resilience that I never knew that I had. I used to not think that I could accomplish things or do things, but today I know that there is nothing that I can't do. So that would be how I would describe myself today.
Tell me a little bit about your life before you went to prison.
Well, I grew up on the farm. I was an only child for the first 8 years of my life. And then my parents, who had divorced, remarried and started having more kids. And so my brothers came. And I had 4 little brothers. My dad didn't spend a lot of time with me. He was in the military and traveled a lot, and that really shaped a lot of things for me, like that I felt abandoned a lot of times. He would promise that he would be there and he wouldn't show up, those kind of things. And my mom, being a single mom, I was left alone a lot as a child. So my first introduction to alcohol was when I was 8 years old. And so I say that, and when I look at an 8-year-old kid, I'm like, that's not normal. 8-year-old kids are supposed to still be playing with dolls and stuff. But because I was alone, my mom was at work, I hung out with kids that were on my street and they were older than me, and I did what they did. So, I'm not really sure when I became a full-blown addict, because it was something that I had done for so long that it just kind of seemed normal to me. I did go to college. I graduated high school. I was always a good student, but when I left school, the party was on, that kind of thing. And I managed it for quite some time. I had a child. I was 24 when my first child was born. I actually did get married for a couple of years. And when my marriage fell apart, I think that's really when my addiction took off. Because, I had these big dreams about life, right? That I was going to grow up and get married and stay married like my grandparents had. And I was going to have a life like they had. I was not going to have a life like my mom or my dad. I wanted to do it different. And when that wasn't how it worked out, it kind of crushed me. So I became the kind of addict that did not work or take care of my family. My kids went into foster care. But when they went into foster care, I had my son and another child, a little girl, and she ended up being adopted by the family that had her in foster care. I did end up getting my son back, and I had put together 7 years of sobriety and had started a new life, and I went to nursing school, and I owned a home, and I just really started getting it together. And then I relapsed. At this point, I have another daughter and my son. My son had graduated high school when I relapsed, but my daughter was still young, so my mom came and got her, and she grew up with my mom. I started getting in trouble with the law. I went from being a registered nurse to living in my car and, doing whatever I had to do to get more drugs. And that led me to getting larceny charges, a lot of like obtaining property through false pretenses kind of charges. And then I got tired of going to jail. And I said, I don't really like jail. And then the last time, instead of stealing, I decided to be, I wouldn't have called it a drug dealer. I just went to my friends and said, hey, why don't we all go in together and then we can get it for a lot cheaper. And then that just took off into this whole other thing that I was not expecting. And so this time when I got in trouble, it was pretty big trouble. Yeah, pretty big trouble. It was really big trouble.
You were a drug dealer.
Right, basically, yeah.
And what were you dealing?
Methamphetamine and heroin and whatever.
How long were you able to sustain that lifestyle?
It was 2 years before I got in trouble. When I look back on it now, I don't know how I did it. I really don't, because I was always in my car, always on the go. Go, 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 go. And, there was just a lot of chaos that goes along with it, a lot of domestic violence, and a lot of it was just crazy.
So how many children did you have?
I have 3 children. Yeah, they're all grown. My middle child is the one that was raised in a different family. We have reconnected. We reconnected while I was inside. But at this point, she's chosen not to have a relationship with me on the outside. I think that both her and her sister, my youngest, which they're only 2 years apart, I think that both of them are really, they want to know if they can trust me. And so they have a lot of walls built up, and they are it's a wait and see kind of thing. My youngest, we can have really good conversations. And then when we are together in front of people, she doesn't really want to be next to me or talk to me, really. She puts up a big wall because she is waiting to see if she can trust me, basically. If I'm going to stay clean, if I'm going to stay out of prison, all I can do is show them. I can't. There's no words that can make her feel safe. It's just going to have to be my actions. That's what it's going to take. So I don't try. I let her just say what she needs to say because I get it,
A lot of trauma.
A lot of trauma.
So it's going to just take time.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that I've been really connecting with lately is trauma and the ways that it affects my ability to handle everyday stress that I used to handle really well, that today I really struggle. And my presence in it's like I made a decision shortly after I got to NCCIW that I was going to follow the rules and I was going to do something different. I just made up my mind that I was going to do something different and I was going to take advantage of every opportunity I could while I was in there. Not that there were a lot of things to take advantage of, because mind you, COVID, I got there in 2021. So it was right at the end of COVID, but things hadn't opened back up, so there weren't volunteers. None of those things were happening. But even a person who did all the right things, you still get traumatized in there. It's the kind of trauma where you're always on edge because you never know what's going to happen next. You never know if something's going to pop off in your bed area. You never know if someone's going to come up behind you and try to attack you. You never know when you're going to have a shakedown. You never know when the rules are going to change because they're constantly changing. It's just this constant living on the edge. And when you're in a pod with, 30 other women and officers come in and they start screaming or cutting down another person that lives there, it doesn't even have to be you. It's still traumatizing. And if I had to say one thing that makes coming out of prison harder than anything else, for me, that's the biggest thing. Because there's barriers, but I'm resilient and I'm resourceful and, I don't stop at just one phone call. I'll keep making calls until I get a hold of someone that can help me with something. But the stress of having to go to the grocery store or paying bills or getting my laundry done, the things that I didn't have to do in prison that were everyday things that I handled just fine before. Now, I really struggle with keeping all the balls in the air. I have anxiety that I never had before as a result of being incarcerated. And my kids have anxiety that they never had before because I was incarcerated, because I wasn't there, because they also didn't know what was going to happen next all the time. And so I'm not really sure what to do with it, But I think recognizing it is the first thing, right? And I don't want to stop talking about it. I want people to realize that, paying a debt to society should not be trauma, should not be traumatizing. There's got to be a better way than what we currently do. The system that we currently have, there has to be a better way.
I really appreciate you saying that. And I really appreciate you describing kind of exactly how it did traumatize you. So you got out and you came to Arise.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Arise is an incredible program. I'm just going to say that. There's so much support and so much love here. And one of the reasons I chose this over some of my other options was that they have, people on staff who were previously incarcerated. And before I came, when they told me about the program part, I was like, I don't know if I want to do all that. I'm tired of being like having boundaries and rules. I want to get out and get to work and get a car and get all the things. I want to get all the things back. And after I've been here like 2 weeks, I'm just like, I love programming. I miss being here now that I have a job. I only come 1 day a week, and I used to come 3 days a week, and I miss it. So it's one of the jokes around here because, they weren't sure if I was going to come, and I wasn't sure if I was going to come. And now I've been out for 5 months, and I have a car, and I have a job, and I was able to get into the RHEI program, which is the Reentry Higher Education Initiative. And I'm getting my bachelor's degree at Campbell University in criminal justice. How about that? And none of that would have happened if I'd have gone anywhere else.
It strikes me that part of what makes Arise work is the women in the program.
Yes, it is. It is. And I can tell you when somebody doesn't make it, it breaks all of our hearts. Like these women are my sisters. That's what we call each other. Hey, sis, how's it going today? Call each other on the phone, text each other, every day. Before I went to prison, I had a really hard time having relationships with women. I was more comfortable in a group of men than I was in a group of women. And today, it's the opposite. As hard as it is, and some days I wake up and I'm like, I don't want to do this. It's too much, And I'll tell you the truth about what motivates me is that programs like the one I'm in right now, if people aren't successful, they won't stay in business, right? The Reentry Higher Education Initiative is this new thing. And if people aren't graduating, then they're going to stop doing it. So, like, this door has opened for me. And I tell myself and the other women that I live with that are in the program too, I said, we're door keepers. We're the ones that have to keep the door open so that our brothers and sisters who are still incarcerated will be able to get out and have a chance like we've had. So we have to finish. So on the days it's really hard and I don't want to get up and I don't want to keep going and I just feel so overwhelmed that I don't know what to do with myself, I just think about the people that I left behind.
While she was in prison, Georgie started a job with Correction Enterprises, an agency within the North Carolina Department of Adult Correction that oversees all the prison industries across the state. At NCCIW, for instance, they oversee the tag plant that makes license plates, a sewing plant, and a braille plant that translates textbooks and other reading materials for the vision impaired. Before she left prison, Correction Enterprises offered Georgie a full-time job as an administrative assistant, and it's a job she loves. She says Correction Enterprises offers incarcerated people valuable skill training and job opportunities when they get out, but just as important, it gives them hope for the future. A quick note, during her interview, Georgie talked about the lasting effects of the trauma she experienced in prison. The anxiety and overwhelm she describes has recently earned a name. It's called post-incarceration syndrome, and we hope to explore this common phenomenon in future episodes. Meanwhile, if you'd like to learn more about it, Tune into April's March 2025 installment of On a Mission with a Purpose, where she talks about her own symptoms of post incarceration syndrome. Now to our final story. Courtney Whistler grew up at the beach and swam competitively for several years. But in her early 20s, she discovered heroin. She spent the next 15 years on a path of self-destruction that finally landed her in prison. Here is her story.
I was born in Virginia, in Culpeper, Virginia, to my mom and my dad, and then 18 months after I was born, my father committed suicide. And coincidentally, I was born on his birthday. So my mom remarried when I was 3 to an amazing man who I knew to be my dad. And together they did books. My dad was a photographer, my mom's an author. So they were very interested in lighthouses in that community. So we lived on the Outer Banks for the majority of my childhood. And then we moved down to Morehead City, and that's where I graduated high school. I swam down there. I swam for like 8 years, 9 years competitively. I loved it. Played tennis. I was very active. It was a good place to grow up. I wouldn't trade where I grew up. I think growing up at the beach is an amazing experience.
It sounds like you had a great childhood.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yet, do you remember anything about your father's suicide?
No, in fact, so I was not told the truth until I was about 18 or 19. Now, I knew something was up, right? I knew something was wrong because people would be talking about it and I'd come in the room and then no one would be speaking. And children pick up on that perception. And I knew there was something fishy about surrounding what happened. And it was told to me that he had had a heart attack and he passed away when really he actually shot himself. But my mom hid that from me very well, the family. But it made sense, though, when I heard it and found out about it, because it made sense, like why everybody kind of looked at me like I was this sad puppy. So my father's side of the family rejected us, and me especially. I had an uncle. He grew up with my dad. Of course, they were close brothers, close in age growing up, and he had had 2 sons. And so when I found out, I set out to find them, to get in touch. I was kind of like on this mission to say, hey, I'm ready to find out who you are. So excited and gung ho, and not realizing on the other side of that door could be also the possibility of rejection, which is what I met. And that really messed with me for a long time. And it was hard to understand because, I wanted to know who they were and more about them and myself in the long run. And that was really hard. So for many years, I didn't know how to kind of process that in a healthy way. So I took it to a bad place. And it didn't do me any favors. I was very hard on myself about it. I used drugs very, very heavy. It was sort of my legal issues. I entered in very precarious and awful relationships because of it. I used it as like a control tactic. Like I would get into a relationship and then just very selfishly stop it at any point, walk away and never talk to them again. And I think it does stem from that abandonment type rejection that I felt growing up. But come to find out, just a few years ago, my uncle, my father's brother, drove himself to work, parked in the back parking lot, and took his own life.
Wow.
So there we have 2, brothers decades apart, genetically sharing the same DNA and leading 2 very different lives. and ultimately facing the same issues. So mental issues. So it stirred them to reach out to me to apologize. They apologized. Well, at least the youngest did, the one I had spoken to before. And he apologized, saying, I'm sorry that we did that. I'm sorry that we rejected you. We just, and he was in this peril of question, like he was where I was years ago after finding out, right? So it was kind of a flashback for me. He was in the exact same position mentally where I was after I had heard, of course, and was just in this like peril, this absolute distress, not understanding why. And of course, I could offer him very little comfort because no one knows why. It's just it's a very sad, confusing thing that people do. Anyway, so I have a good position when I talk to my clients about suicide and things like that. So I'm a peer support now. That's what I do. I'm down here in Brunswick County, and I really enjoy it.
So it sounds like you're doing really well, and you described how you got addicted. What was your drug of choice? How did that trajectory?
Sure. So like every, teenage kid in high school that experiments with drugs, it started with marijuana, of course, the universal gateway. And then I began taking pills. I had my wisdom teeth out, and I, of course, initially was very sick off of them, and then until I wasn't, and then I liked that sensation. So it opened that door of knowing what that felt like. And I had a series of injuries. So I would take pills. I had an experience in college. I was drugged by someone, and whatever he gave me, like, shut my kidneys down. And so it was the reason why I had to leave East Carolina University, and I couldn't go to class. It was awful. I was urinating blood. So it ultimately brought me back home. And so I was really tarnished as far as school was concerned. I didn't share that with my parents. They just kind of knew that something happened. So I went back home and just didn't connect with the right people. But pills turned into stronger pain pills, pure pain pills, instead of eating them, snorting them, and then shooting them up. And then I started heroin. I was in a relationship that was not good. So I started shooting heroin fairly regularly. And then I experienced with meth. And then I figured out that taking them together was a really good thing, which of course it wasn't. So, and I've done a lot of damage to my body. Unfortunately, I've got a lot of scars. I almost lost my left hand from a miss. Yeah. I had to have 3 surgeries in 21 days to save my left hand. I broke my back 2 different times. And unfortunately, from having broken it the first time, the second, I had compression fractures. And from shooting drugs, I introduced strep, and it's not meningitis, sorry. And it found its way into my spine and settled there and created an abscess on my spine. And I almost couldn't walk. So I was in the hospital for 6 weeks at least on IV antibiotics. It was awful.
It sounds like you almost tried to kill yourself.
Yeah. And I didn't look at it like that until I got clean. I've had little short bouts of, sobriety here and there. Nothing like the 4 years that I have now, but it's amazing how I can look back at it now and just think, how wasn't I killing myself? How was I not doing this terrible thing to myself every day and to be imprisoned by it? Because it's its own prison. And I was also on the run. I had legal issues because during COVID, I refused to go to court. and further prolonging an inevitable thing that ultimately landed me in prison for an entire year. But I didn't want to face that, and I didn't want to get clean. So out here I was, fishing for this poison and dealing with crazy people to get it, and selling my body to get it.
What finally got you clean?
I got arrested. I was in my little apartment place. It was a Section 8 housing neighborhood in Asheville, North Carolina. And someone called me saying that they were going to break into my house. They had been back to that neighborhood multiple times looking for me. And it was just a matter of time because there was a reward, because I had been running for like over a year. So I left my apartment and I walked down the road and I went into a girl's house that was with me, and she just let me in. She let me in, she locked me in. And I was just going to ride it out and wait until they left. Well, in North Carolina, if they have evidence and believe that strongly that you're in a residence, they have the right to break and enter. They came and got me. So of course I was angry when it happened, but overall I was very relieved. So, because it was over finally, I think like when they were doing my intake in jail at Asheville in Buncombe County, I was falling asleep. The nurse was asking me questions. I was falling asleep. I was so relieved, so relieved that it was over. I didn't have to look over my shoulder anymore. I could call my mom.
So what was that year in prison like?
It was okay. It was both the best and the worst thing that ever happened to me. I had a good job at the sewing plant, so I worked. So I had purpose. I got along okay. I have this ability to chameleon and adapt to my surroundings. And so I just did my best to fit in, but not fit in, to like be accepted, but not be like a part of, if that makes any sense. If I was not at work or taking a shower, I was on my bed reading. I can't tell you how many books I read. My mom did an amazing job of sending me books, and I just read, and I kept reading, and I kept reading, and I drew. I also had a little side hustle. I would paint people's shoes, and then I found a paintbrush, and I started painting like cards for people to send home and for others to give away, and I charged for it, and I enjoyed that. So I had a little side business. And it was the first time I had ever had a little side business, and I've kind of continued that outside of prison. So
How did you hook up with Arise?
I had talked to a couple girls that were in my quad, and they had heard about this. It was actually called Interfaith Prison Ministry before it was Arise. That's how I found out about them. And I had asked my case manager because my mom did not want me to come straight from prison to her house. She just didn't want that. She just had enough going on with my dad. My dad was failing. My grandma had already passed, but my dad had dementia. So we felt it was best that I go somewhere where I could go to school for free. I mean, my God, they don't charge me rent. In fact, I get a stipend every 2 weeks. And even though I've moved in with my mom down here, since I'm still in school, they're going to look at giving me some support for rent down here. So Kim Stone picked me up. It was on a Sunday in November. She took me to the house, and I met my roommates. One of them I knew very, very well. So that was a good thing. But yeah, I mean, they've helped me get my peer support certification, which I use as income. And I work as a peer support now. I have 7 clients, that I help because of my own lived experience with all the stuff that I've been through and put myself through. So I could have never asked for my pain and trauma to be now a blessing and a way to help others. I could have never imagined that.
You're studying at Campbell. What are you studying, and how do you see your future?
So I'm a psychology major. I'm actually shopping now for master's programs, but I do want to continue. I want to be a doctor. And unfortunately, because of my record, I don't believe I can be a medical doctor anymore. But somehow I believe that I can get it in social work, I think. So that's my hope. That's what I'm working towards.
If you had one thing that you wanted to say to other people who maybe even are at the bottom,
Right.
themselves, what would that be?
It might seem like your world is over if you stop, or that you can't stop, but you can. It is possible. Ask for help. There is help out there. It's going to hurt for a little while, just to be completely real, but nothing worth fighting for like your life. It's gonna take some effort and some energy, but you can get it back. And it only takes a few years to get everything that you had back. I mean, I have a vehicle now, I've got a great career. I've earned back trust with my family after having ruined that. So it can definitely happen for you. If I could do it, you can too.
Right now, Courtney is trying to choose between the social work programs at UNC Pembroke and UNC Chapel Hill. She's leaning towards Pembroke, she says, because she can earn her certificate as a substance abuse counselor without adding time. After that, she says she plans to get her PhD, saying, "My brain is hungry for knowledge, and the more school I do, the harder it will be for me to personally, to quote, unquote, throw it away and return to use." That's our show for today. I want to thank the women of Arise for sharing their stories. Mental health issues and substance abuse pose an enormous challenge for our society, and punishment in lieu of treatment is too often our response. So we'll continue to cover these stories in the upcoming season. But we're going to take a short break. In the meantime, stay tuned for April's latest installment of her series On a Mission with a Purpose, to learn about a new advocacy organization she's involved with. Thanks for listening, and until next time, this is the 98% Life After Prison.